This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your friend with a pussy magnet.
Welcome, my lovely lumps. Or should I say lovely labs? I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge. We're going to yarn about all things sexuality, womanhood, relationships, intimacy, holistic health, and everything in between. Your legs. Ooh, can't help myself. Anyway, we're going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up, you're about to receive the sex ed that you never had and have a bloody good laugh while you're at it. Before we dive in, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. It's an absolute privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content in Naarm, and I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if you're ready, let's flap and do this. Oh my God, is there such thing as too many vagina jokes in the one intro? Whatever, it's my podcast. I'm leaving it in.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up a couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
Hey gang, just before we jump into this episode, I wanted to offer you an opportunity to access my new mini course for free before I start charging for it in future. It's for people with vulvas and it's quick to complete. It's all about demystifying the female body and pleasure anatomy and getting some basic fundamentals to understand your body better. It's called Pussy Pleasure Secrets, Your Roadmap to Bedroom Bliss. You can grab it on the freebies page of my website or in the show notes. It's a great little free resource to kind of dip your toe in or act as a bit of a taster for my work. So if you've ever been curious about this sort of thing and you just don't know where to start, or you want a really quick, easy, accessible, non-threatening way to get the ball rolling and start working on this stuff, this is a great place to start. Cool hat. You look like a fortune teller.
I look like a what?
A fortune teller.
Totally. Oh my God. That is totally what it reminds me of. I couldn't work out what it reminded me of, but that's definitely one.
Yeah, full white girl psychic.
Damn, dude.
Serving charlatan. Carney charlatan.
Damn, maybe I'm getting into cultural appropriation territory on Romanians. Hopefully not. I'm going to have to research that. Honestly, every time I make something, I'm like, okay, this looks sick. But what am I doing right now as a white person? It's so funny. Like, I'm having to be so careful.
Oh my God. Have you just like crocheted one of the chieftain like feather Native American headdresses?
Dude, I'm so worried that I'm accidentally going to do that, you know? I haven't.
Yeah. No, I feel you.
Okay.
You look cool though.
Thanks. If it's appropriation, I guess it's just going to be relegated to this podcast and hopefully people don't come at me for it. Now, let's have a chat.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Are you going to do your usual intro or do you want me to do it? You want me to do your intro?
I mean, well, I was just thinking I could put it in after once I figure out what this episode might be titled or about, you know, like, but you're welcome to do an intro. Go on. Do it. Hey, Labia Legends, Hannah here.
Hey, Labia Legends, Hannah here. I am taking over the podcast today to interview Freya because something crazy happened over the weekend. I got a message from Freya, and the first thing that I said in response was, no, let's not talk about it. We are going to debrief on a podcast because Freya went to a sex party. Freya, your little, very, very knowledgeable and empowered, yet vanilla queen, has somehow decided to take her ass to a kink-based sex party. And she's done it for science. She's done it for the lounge. She did it out of curiosity. She did it to push the edges and see what she was going to find. So, Freya, today I am going to talk to you about this sex party, and I would love to get the dish. Now, let's just say right at the top, we're not here to yuck anyone's yums. If you want to go to a sex party, that's awesome. But we are here for the average man, the average woman, the average person who has not walked into a sex party before and who has a lot of questions and a lot of maybe assumptions that are based on what we've seen in movies or what we've heard from, you know, the dingy alleyways of Craigslist. And we want to know what it was like. All right. Are you ready?
My God, you're such a hype queen. I feel like you're a radio host. Nailing it.
Well,
All right, yeah,
now.
we're ready.
Okay.
Have fun with it, babe. I'm having fun with it. I'm in bed. This is great.
Yeah, dude, I'm in bed too.
I'm just being a pillow princess and letting you take over. It's so good.
Amazing. Good. Be a pillow princess. Do it. Now, I want to ask, are we allowed to say, like, where it was? Or, like, are we allowed to say, like, you know, are we allowed to say anything about it? Because what I would love to hear is the description of the event that you read. And it was, like, your first impression of the event. It was my first impression for the event. I'd love to start with that so that the listeners can hear what that description sounds like, form their own first impression, and then see if what they're thinking kind of matches up with what you saw.
Good idea. Well, do you have the description in front of you, or like do I have to get that up?
No, I can get that up, but like let's just take 10 seconds
Set the scene
while I search for that. And also, I wanted to ask: Am I allowed to read it out? Like, am I gonna?
Yeah. So I reckon we totally can name it and whatever, because really, I'm not saying anything disparaging.
No, because I mean, your experience was like really positive.
It was great. It was super interesting.
Sounds of things. So
yeah, lots of really positive feedback from like the veterans that this was like one of the best sex parties they'd been to in the last 10 years in Melbourne, you know? So like I'd happily promote that. And yeah,
exactly. If you're running sex parties, this is going to be some good PR by the sounds of things. So okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So let me read it. It's called, actually, I have no idea how to pronounce
I can't pronounce that. Okay. Well, so don't worry about that bit, because that was the name of the kink dungeon that my friend was running inside the larger event, which is called Virtue and Vice. So I think Virtue and Vice run the sex parties, and then they've just started trialing putting a kink dungeon in there that is run by a different crew.
I gotcha. So we've got Virtue and Vice, and we've got Sehnsucht, which sounds German. That's maybe the kink dungeon. Maybe I totally killed that pronunciation, or maybe I just
it sounded good.
But it sounded pretty cool. And I'm gonna go with it. So this is the event. We're gonna get Freya's first big dish about it. Here's the description. Step inside the Gothic church of Sehnsucht, where all is encouraged and forgiven. Come and atone for your sins, or commit some new ones. Enter and confess your transgressions to our priestesses and priests. Leave unburdened with a clean conscience, but maybe a few bruises. Dance with the devil to sermons of Mad Angel, Domina, Big Fucking Robots, and Zaptig. Members of the clergy will be standing by to assist you in any means necessary to help you see the light. Virtue and Vice has proven itself to be a breath of fresh air in the Melbourne play party scene, an ambitious undertaking to fill the striking Melbourne Pavilion with all manner of bedroom antics. The V&V crew have a host of parties under their belt and are ready to throw their biggest party yet. Beyond the plush surrounds of the main dance floor, the team behind V&V's Kinky Corners, Sehnsucht, is ready to provide something darker for those who choose to seek it out. Sehnsucht is a space to indulge in the shadowy facets of pleasure, a party within a party where fetishists and kinksters may seek to enact their driving desires. Dude, I just love this language. It's so intense. Where the walls are clad with restraints and the music commands your movement, Sehnsucht's unique amalgamation of art, technology, and kink will be sure to delight and at times gleefully shock the senses of those who keenly join us. For the curious but uninitiated, our service tops are available to guide you in caring but firm hands. Whilst those who know the path will find equipment and toys to delight both novice and seasoned players, and a special treat awaits those with more exhibitionistic hearts. Dungeon monitors and consent angels will be at hand to answer questions and address any concerns. As this is a BDSM party within a larger SOP event, a dress code is strictly enforced. Elaborate kink fetish wear is not necessary, but street clothes, for example, jeans, shorts, and t-shirts, are not considered acceptable. Erotic costumes, lingerie, your favorite pair of fancy underwear, or even your birthday suit are all considered acceptable. Please feel free to DM us if more clarification is required. Consent. Consent is paramount at Virtue and Vice and Sehnsucht. No means no, and consent should always be enthusiastically and freely given before any play commences. Consent is not infinite and can be revoked at any time by any involved party. Clothing is not an indication of a person's consent. When viewing any type of scene or play, be aware of what kind of energy you are contributing. Watching from afar with curiosity is okay, but leering unblinkingly is not. Do not interrupt a play scene, and always be sure to seek consent from all concerned parties before entering a scene. If at any time someone is making you feel uncomfortable, please seek out or flag down one of our consent angels or dungeon monitors. Beyond the basic elements of consent, there are some extra principles to consider when engaging in kink play. These are briefly highlighted below and can further be researched with a simple Google search. If you're unfamiliar with consent models used in kink BDSM, we highly encourage you to inform yourself before attending Sehnsucht. And then there's some terms there to look up. There's SSC, which is safe, sane, consensual. There's PRIC, which is personal responsibility inform consensual kink. And there's RAC, which is risk-aware consensual kink. While we seek to foster an inclusive atmosphere, we hold a zero-tolerance approach to bad behavior, consent breaches, and such transgressions will result in eviction from the venue. Wow. Okay. When I suggested we read that out, I did not remember how long that was. But you know what?
It's massive. I was like, is she going to read all of it?
Oh
but,
God,
it is good. It's good.
It
well
is
set
good.
up.
And the thing is, like, part of the reason I wanted to read that out, because over half of that was about consent, which I found really interesting because I know that that's something that we always hear that the kink and the BDSM scene do really well, is they do consent really well because they do things that push the boundary of what's generally allowed during play. And this is one thing I'd love to talk to you about today, to see if, like, that was what you found when you went there. But just starting off, let's rewind a little bit. How did you hear about this event, and why did you go as the resident vanilla queen? What are you doing at a sex party?
Totally. I love how much you loved that event description. But yeah, I agree. It's like, it's really important how a space is set up, and I think they did a great job of that. So, and it gives so much context to, like, oh, okay, like, I'd never been to a sex on premises party and seen how people kind of held it and set up a space. But yeah, basically, a friend puts on the kink component of these events and is involved in that scene. I don't know him super well, so I don't know, like, shit all about him actually, or like what he does other than this. But he just he'd sort of heard of the Labia Lounge through friends and said, hey, do you reckon, like, setting up the live Labia Lounge at this, like, sex party would be a vibe? Like, if you want to come along to one and check it out and, like, kind of, just have a sus, then we can go from there and, like, chat about whether it would be suited to setting the Labia Lounge up and doing, like, a Sxx Party Edition, which obviously I was absolutely tickled at the idea, and I was like, fuck, that would be dope. And, but then also just being like, oh my God, I really don't want to go to this thing. Like, I've never had any interest in kink or BDSM or wanting to go to something like that. I'm in, like, such my, like, where I'm at in my personal life and the energy I have, the self-esteem, like, my social capacity, it's so low. So I was like, am I really going to go to a sex party alone and just do this thing? But I was like, you know what? Yeah, I am, because what a great opportunity.
Yes, totally.
And I want to do a Labia Lounge there. And I was like, okay, I just have to literally treat this like work and research, because there's multiple reasons why I could benefit from going. I'm like, it's I'm due for a little interesting experience that's kind of at outside of my comfort zone and that's going to be new, because it's hard to find like novelty. Like I've been to so many workshops and different things, like nothing much really shocks me anymore. So I'm kind of like, it's been a while since I've pushed my edge. I should do that. Also, as like a sex educator and a sex coach, it's like I know a lot, more than the average person about like open relating, kink, BDSM, sex parties and stuff, but only theoretically, like I like not experientially. Like I only know like what I've learned from talking to people and reading and researching. I haven't actually experienced all that much in that space of like going and putting myself in the environment and dipping my toe in. So I was like, okay, it's going to make me a better like sex coach. This is my professional duty to do this so that I can serve my clients best if they're into kink or swinging, And then so I was just like, oh man, all right, I've got to go. I'm just going to do it. I don't feel like it. It was so hard to drag myself out of the house. I literally didn't have anything to wear because I was like, oh, the dress code, like you've got to be like kinky and gothic, and I literally do not own lingerie. I had nothing to wear, and
this is one of the things I would love for you to describe. Tell us about your outfit, because it was awesome. It was just like the best representation of what you've just said. Like, tell us about it.
Oh my god. Okay. Well, it turns out I actually totally had something I could have worn that would have been in theme. I still have like an old dominatrix outfit that I bought years back when I tried my hand at that for like a couple of sessions, which I have discussed on this podcast before. It was a huge fail. I hated it. But I still have this like black kind of like leotardy thing with like lace and whatever. And I had these like leather fingerless gloves. I actually had heaps of shit I could have worn, but fucking uncomfortable. I put it on and I was like, no, it feels like walking thrush. I'm not doing this to my body.
Totally.
Like, I'm going to this bloody thing. They can handle me in something a bit comfier than this. Not down to sign up for a fucking wedgie and a camel toe all bloody night. So
Freya takes a stand. No leather on the flaps.
No. I'm all about comfort, baby. So I just put on like my Labia Lounge bathers. It's like a one-piece leotard, just literally like bathers with Labia Lounge cover art all over it. And I had my Labia Lounge fanny pack, which is hot pink. I had like a leopard print frilly kind of went over it was a layer. And I had socks and slides. Like I had just some like plastic leopard print slides with my sports socks.
Yeah, you looked amazing, but I think you were just like the best like version of you and the best Freya the Labia Lounge goes to a sex party ever, because like you looked like a total babe, but like you're not gonna get leather in your flaps. Like you represented the brand in beautiful big bright colors, which I love. I love it.
They're lucky I dressed up at all, honestly. So I was like, well, I put on dark lipstick and, heavy eye makeup.
The dark lipstick was good for you. You don't do that too often.
No, I mean, it was a little bit of a silly choice in terms of like, you can't really kiss anyone if you've committed to the dark lippy vibe. But I wasn't really open to kissing anyone when I was there anyway. So I was kind of like, do you know what? Dark lippy, perfect deterrent. But it was funny because I think like you so on the way there I like parked my van, and on my walk in I sent you a little like video because I was like, this is so funny. I literally just like realized that it's freezing and I've got to walk down the street to get into the building and I'm in a leotard, and so I was like, well, I don't have a trench coat, like I guess I'm just gonna put my like hot pink champion trackies over the leotard, chuck on my hoodie and roll in like that. And then you take off your layers when you get there. But it was just so funny because I was like sitting in the car. I was like, oh man, I'm hungry. This is usually like my bedtime. my housemate had packed me some snacks from like, she's got a 3-year-old. And I was like, oh, I hope they have, do you think they're going to have like sex snacks there? Because like people need calories if they're going to be banging all night. Like, will they have some like hot cacao available or something? Like, I'm fucking hungry already. And she was like, dude, take some sex snacks. Like, here, have some like lunchbox snacks, like little chocolate covered rice cakes and shit that like she buys for her daughter. And so I just smashed all the snacks in the car, rolled in. It was a very funny aesthetic. I was finding it all very entertaining. Until I walked in and I was like, oh, fucking hell, I'm not in Kansas anymore. I actually don't even know what to do because there's a whole protocol. And like, you know, you got to cloak all your shit. They give you a garbage bag to dump all your like layers and clothes in so that you can get into the lingerie and the theme and stuff. So there's a massive line at the cloak. I couldn't be bothered. I went to the toilets and just took off my layers. Yeah. And carried them around. Anyway, sorry.
I just love this. Hang on, can we pause for a second? Like, I just love this idea. It's kind of like when you go to a spa, you know, you go in, but in a spa, you might leave them in like a fancy rose-scented locker. I love that it's like garbage bags. We're in the Melbourne
pigeonhole. I know.
That's so cool.
I know. I loved that too. I was like, that's fucking funny. Because there's hundreds of people. So this was like a really big one. I don't think that they're this large that often. This was like a huge venue. There was hundreds of people.
So how many people were we talking? Like how like just try and get us the feeling of how many people there were.
Oh God. Well, it's the Melbourne Pavilion, so it's a pretty big venue, and there's multiple spaces. So everyone's in different. There's probably like 4 or 5 different places they could be.
And how big are these rooms? Like, what kind of rooms are they?
All different sizes.
Or like a
a couple of them had stages. Yeah, one of them had a dance. A couple of them had a dance floor. Yeah. I don't know, maybe like 500 people.
Cool, okay.
Maybe less? I have no idea.
What else is the space like? Is there a bar? Is there like any like food, or is there, you know, like
there's no food.
Okay.
No snacks, which I feel like ridiculous. There should have been some fucking protein bars like next to the condoms and lube, honestly. Which was but there's a bar, and I think they have fights there normally at this venue. Hey, baby babes. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to pop my head into the lounge here and mention another virtual lounge that I'd love you to get around. It's the Labia Lounge Facebook group that I've created for listeners of the potty to mingle in. There you'll find extra bits and bobs like freebies, behind the scenes, or discounts for offerings from guests who have been interviewed on the podcast. There'll also be, hopefully, inspiring, thought-provoking conversations and support from a community of labial legends like yourself. My vision for this is that it becomes a really supportive, educational and hilarious resource for you to have more access to me and a safe space to ask questions you can't ask anywhere else. So head over to the links in the show notes or look up the Labia Lounge group in Facebook and I'll see you in there. And now, back to the episode. Yeah, so anyway, but it was crazy. Like, I guess there's all this stuff that I'd never thought about, the like logistics or the ins and outs of like what they would need to kind of provide or set up at a sex party. But it was like, it all made so much sense, but it was so interesting to kind of like wander around and then be like, oh, as you enter this space, which has got like places for people to fuck, there's like a kind of long table with no shit, like 10 to 12 different kinds of condoms, like every size you can imagine, different brands, a liter pump bottle of lube.
Dude, no way.
It was so good. Dude. I was like, oh my God, true. And that's where they should have had the snacks, obviously. And like, I don't know, some chewing gum or something.
Dude, totally.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I got to get motion lotion in here ASAP. Like,
oh my God,
we'll do a liter pump bottle.
Please.
Liter pump bottle for sex parties, or like sample sachets, and we can start like disseminating our lube everywhere.
Dude,
in the sex scene. Yeah.
I'm wondering, is there mood lighting? Because surely, you know, you don't want like full on hectic sort of like fluorescent overhead lights, or do you? Like, I'm like, hang on a second, maybe there's one really gross room where the lighting's really bad, so everyone's just at their most like stripped back. You don't even have like the glory of soft lighting falling on your skin, which obviously is probably a kink for someone, but I'm imagining soft mood lighting. What was it like?
Totally. Like, they're not amateurs, you know, like the lighting was like adequately dim, and there was different, I mean, they're like, it wasn't that dim. Like, it was very, like the kink dungeon was the darkest probably. And then one of these like areas with a big dome
Were there
where there was a
areas that
lot
were
of
like, like red like neons? Like I'm imagining like the kinky, what's it called? Like a
nah, dude, I honestly can't fucking remember. I wasn't paying that much attention. It was like, they would have had with the stage, they would have had a lighting set up with multiple
yeah.
different colored lights that kind of changed. There was burlesque shows on stage at different times. The lighting would have, they would have had a lighting guy in the main bit. And then the other areas, yeah, it was kind of dim, and some of the areas had lots of those like fake candles. So like firelight vibes. Yeah.
High production, sexy dungeon with everything that you've got on one big table, everything you could need except protein bars. So you're ready. You walk in. Were you meeting anyone in there? What was the vibe? Or how did it start? Did you explore around, or what did you do first?
Well, I rolled in and was like, I don't know how to engage with this. It feels very abrupt to have walked in from the outside and all of a sudden now I'm in here. So, and I was like, I've got okay. So like full disclosure, it felt so abrupt and jarring and kind of like out of my comfort zone because I smoked a doobie in the car right before I went in.
You would have walked in there and gone, what the fuck?
Whoa. Yeah, I know. I don't know why, sometimes, I don't know why I think that's a good idea. I mean, sometimes it totally is and it helps. It gives me a bit of social juice and more chatty and most of the time it's helpful. But yeah, in this case, I was like, that was a really funny choice, Freya, because now you're really discombobulated and fucking stoned in this really hectic environment. I mean, it was absolutely fine. It was more that I didn't know the protocol. So there was queues for the cloakroom. There was queues to get in. I was kind of, just like, oh, okay, like, do I wait in line and cloak all my shit? Is that what that's happening over there? Or like, do I just go in? Am I allowed to just walk in like this? Like with all my layers on still? Like
a new space, like not knowing what
and I didn't know the layout.
The layout, and also just like because you're not like a sex party goer, you don't know what like the sort of like
etiquette are.
Yeah, you don't know sort of like,
Well, that's it. I was like, I just didn't want to like do a faux pas without realizing, I was like, I don't know how, and there wasn't a whole lot of like, I mean, I guess usually people have already been to one before or they're coming with someone. I went alone and I'd never been to one before. So there wasn't really anyone telling me like, okay, so are you new here? Cool. You come over here and you can cloak your stuff and then this is how this works. And then there's a wristband system.
Right.
So like no one explained that to me and I just rolled in and I was like, I'm going to go to the toilets immediately, find where they are. Yeah. Took off my layers, took a couple of deep breaths. As soon as I walked in, I was like, I walked into the women's toilets and I walked in and there's like a guy, like an older kind of man and a couple of women. One's got a strap-on on. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah. Okay. I am at a sex party, like straight up. Like it's, and a very open, and I don't know if it's all sex parties are like this or I don't know, but like the fact that like the toilets, no one was like the gendered toilets weren't being like followed. And I was like, sweet, okay, yeah, like I fully forgot like what I guess I haven't really been in many spaces like that where there's just no shame, everyone's free to do, they're kind of just doing what they want to do and not worrying about like fucking gendered toilets. Like,
I think that's interesting because that's a form of social etiquette or like a custom that we've all agreed on as a society. That's not really sexual, but that even just having like this sort of the responsibility of that or the shackle of that at a sex party, it's like something that people are eager to cast off. Like I find that really interesting because that kind of fits in with the whole theme of, like no shame, like just kind of like, that's interesting because there's really no need to let's be.
No, totally. Although like, and I mean, I don't know, like I only saw a guy in there once over the whole night. So maybe that was just an outlier or maybe, and like, I didn't go into the men's toilets because I'm just so in the habit of just like wandering into the fucking little person with the dress on it. But like, yeah, that was like the first thing I noticed where I was like, that is one indicator that I'm at a sex party as opposed to just at a club. Because it wasn't super like, it was just like, wow, my conditioning is so ingrained that like I noticed that straight away and I was like, oh, oh, yeah, of course. Oh, like,
Right.
and then just a few things like that, I started noticing that my brain would really like pick out,
Yeah.
um, which was just like, which just kind of showed me like, oh, yes, you are at a sex party in this different, there aren't those social constructs or confines. And I really loved like noticing those things because I'm very rarely in an environment where that's the case,
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Like that in itself would be like a huge thing to try to acclimatize to. Like a space where that's all sort of like cast aside. It's
It's
interesting.
like when you go to another country and you can't help but notice like the different way that they do like really little things, and it's like so um arbitrary, like the things that you notice, but you just notice them when you're in a different place and you're like, oh, we do that differently in Australia, or like, oh, it was like that.
Yeah, and I guess the sort of theme of you being like new there, like here's everyone, they all kind of seem to know what to do. They're all having sex in the bathroom or like whatever. Like I don't know.
No. There was no one having sex in the bathroom. I feel like there's still some etiquette around that. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, maybe they weren't having
Maybe
sex.
not. Who fucking knows? That's another thing I would like to say. I am like I might be describing something that's not aligned with your experience or knowledge, but like this is my absolute first and only sex party I've been to, so I'm not an expert, obviously.
No. You're not. I mean, you're not an expert, but you've been to a sex party, which is more than I've been to, which is zero sex. One thing that I did want to just slot in here was just this funny joke that we had about you being like the ultimate sort of like temptation for like people in this case. You have this like young sort of like hot woman, but she's never, she's really vanilla. Like, I don't really go for that kind of stuff. And she's there in her little cute, like Labia Lounge outfit. Like that to me, if you are like, I'm putting myself inside the mind of like someone who wants to taste some forbidden fruit and corrupt some young maidens. I feel
I'm
like
basically a virgin.
I know you are basically a virgin. And so the thing that I wanted to talk about that's related to this, which is a little bit more serious, is I feel like when people think of sex parties, they imagine probably like lots of old creepy white dudes. I would love to hear more about like what the demographic was like and how you felt like navigating that space, because you are like, like a young, like quote unquote vulnerable. I'm not going to say that you're vulnerable, but I'm saying usually a young woman does not go and put herself in a situation that could potentially be dangerous. So the idea that you went and did that is really cool, because it says that this image that we might have in our minds of like all these old creepy men kind of like taking advantage of all these like young people who are like super naive and they don't know what's going on. Is that the vibe? Is it full of old creepy men? What, did you feel safe in there? Did that consent, that whole second half of the event description, did that kind of consent message that they pushed kind of come through? Like, was the atmosphere safe and from that kind of point of view, like welcoming? Or tell us about
Yeah, I feel like that trope of like the old creepy men at sex parties and stuff is like really outdated. I don't think that a lot of that goes on anymore I mean, I don't know from experience, but like talking to people like most, and I've had quite a few friends over the years that have gone to different sorts of play parties, and it sounds like most of them these days, there's a bit of a rule that like if you're a man, you have to either be part of a couple or you have to have a friend who's a femme bringing you. And I know that some of the sex parties, like an old housemate of mine used to go to, like that were like private ones rather than like a big thing like this. Yeah, the tickets for the men were like $150 and the tickets for the women were like $30 or whatever, because obviously like they didn't want to encourage just a heap of single men rolling in and then ruining the vibe or the numbers being skewed or whatever. So I think like nowadays they're pretty like onto it, and you generally have to know someone or have an in if you're a single man. And so for the most part, it did seem like there's a community, within the scene where like people probably go to like mixers and stuff and meet in a non-sexual setting, and they form some rapport and they kind of know each other around the traps and from different events or parties. And so there's a bit of a community and some familiarity, and then also people, come with partners or friends or whatever. So it didn't seem like there was a lot of just random single people like looking to pull. And it was a very like, it was pretty varied, the demographic, but like I would say, you know, majority between like 25 and 45. There wasn't really that many older people. There was lots of young people, lots and lots of just like young hot people. And yeah, I mean, but I think like this, so I was speaking to a couple who've been going to different sex parties for like 10 years, and they were kind of saying like, this is, you know, this is one of the best ones they've ever been to. This crew really like obviously are quite across it with regards to the consent stuff and the setting up the space and holding that space and taking that very seriously, because you can really feel the difference. They were like, you know, this crowd is just so like, it's so friendly, it's so welcoming, it's so like consensual, it's very safe. And there had been parties that they'd been to in the past where, you know, it wouldn't be out of the question to be like having sex with your partner there and some old guy come and like jizz on your back, you know, like, so like I think that has been definitely a thing, part of the scene, but the events like this are like quite curated and specific about, and some other ones like there's communities that you can join with like a vetting process where that you have to do an interview on Zoom, and like, you know, once you're let into that community, then they hold events, mixers and play parties for the people that are part of it, and there's a bit of gatekeeping for that exact reason. So yeah,
crazy. Okay, well that's I guess a really good thing to hear. And
there was like
I have another question for you about this. I'm also curious to know, what was the racial sort of like cross section? Was it mostly white people? Or do you feel like that it was sort of representative of, you know, the population? Because one thing, and I mean, like, this is just an example, but one thing that you do notice is like in a lot of these sort of alternative scenes, like I can say I'm just a yoga teacher, but one sort of problem in the yoga scene is that it doesn't really attract often a lot of diversity, and it also like almost never attracts First Nations people, which I think makes a lot of sense because they have a lot of their own sort of traditions to hold on to. But it does make me wonder if some of these more, you know, niche scenes do exclude people on the basis of things that like don't really matter, not creepiness, but maybe like, you know, they're not as racially friendly. Or did you feel like that wasn't the case? It's just a question.
Fuck knows, dude. I've only been to one. Like, and I think that I highly doubt there'd be, I mean, I don't know. I'm not qualified to answer that question in any shape or form. At this particular event, there was like, mostly white people, but there is mostly white people in Australia. Like,
exactly,
it was, you know, it wasn't a big enough crowd that I was like, wow, this is overwhelmingly white for how many people there are here. There was like definitely other ethnicities, but it's probably a similar ratio to like if you walked down the street, you know?
Yeah, okay, cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
yeah, it was very like seemed very accepting and non-judgmental and like body positive and obviously sex positive, and I think like what it is like
was it just when you say like, you know, a lot of young hot people, are we thinking like the media stock standard of what they tell us a naked body looks like, or was there a range of like different kinds of bodies and different kinds of people? And
absolute range. Yeah. No, it was a total range. I think generally, like all of those things that often communities or kind of a culture of an event or whatever get categorized in, like don't apply, because this is such a niche and to most people kind of an extreme hobby.
yeah.
And so the people that do it are like, we don't give a fuck if you're like this or that or what you like. If you're into this, then we have this really unique and often like taboo, shamed, judged like thing in common. And like that in itself means that you're part of this, like, you know, like it's a little bit like any kind of like cult and I don't use that in like a negative sense, but it's like, you know, there's a culture around this, and because generally people are leading a bit of a secret life and maybe they don't tell everyone about this, or they you know, they feel as though they'd be ostracized or judged. If
So
people
almost
knew,
like,
it's like if they're there with other people, they're like, fuck yeah, you're into this too, cool, like I see you, I
yeah,
recognize you, like let's just have fun, like
like
so
it
they're quite
creates
welcoming.
a shared camaraderie without having to
Yeah.
communicate. You already know that in one way you're on the same level. So you kind of know.
Yeah. And like you know, a friend who I bumped into there was saying that the feeling of the crowd and the event was kind of similar to him, to his martial arts background, where he would be at fights. And there was like this community that gathered around the martial arts fights, and that he's like, it's a very similar vibe because you're kind of dealing with the shadow. Like in real life, you can't, it's not great to go and like bash someone up and fight them and cause pain and harm and be violent. Like that's not acceptable. But in this particular space, it is acceptable in a particular way. And so if we're all sharing in the enjoyment of that, and in the fact that like we see it as an art form and a skill set, like then we've got this kind of camaraderie because like we're all there enjoying like this element of the shadow side of humanity. And he was like, it feels similar in this sense because it's like BDSM and kink and like sex very similarly get kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
stigmatized, and it's a bit of shadow work as well.
Totally. And also it's kind of because it gets stigmatized, but also sex is very vulnerable. And often like when people have sex, they're showing like a really true part of themselves. And I think that that's sort of similar. If you think about violence, it's like a really sort of, it's similar to sex because it's this sort of like very base part of yourself. It's just like, it's not really governed by like the laws of like social kind of like expectations. You know what I mean? Like people have sex to sort of like lose themselves or to find something that they can't find in their everyday life. So you have a bunch of people who are like letting their guard down, even if they're not having sex, enough to like stand in front of someone having sex. Like that's.
Oh, well, and all of the kink stuff as well. Like that's exactly why, people enjoy that. And it's vulnerable. And it was really interesting. Though the kind of sex that was happening in like the communal spaces, to me, I just felt like I was in a porno because it was like heaps of jackhammer boning, heaps of like in and out friction based hard and fast, like bend over and pound someone in the butthole, or like, you know, give a gluck gluck fucking 1000 or whatever. Reference to the esoteric episode. There's a 21-year-old who was like, you haven't even heard of a gluck gluck 3000? What the fuck? It's like a really intense gobby. But anyway, we can get it. Something that I just remembered that I wanted to like talk about on the piece of consent, because I didn't want to forget. They had this cool wristband system, which I don't know if they do this at all parties. It's a little bit like the traffic light kind of party vibes, but there was like 6 different wristband colors and you could wear more than one. And like one color was like, I'm open to hot makeouts, and one was like, I'm DTF, and you know, they had different things that people were up for. And so you could sort of see someone's wristbands and the color and know whether like they were open to being approached. And what they were down for, you know, to engage with that night. So I thought that really was cool because I was like, that's
because I feel like,
and it
really
said like the wristband. It said like the wristband does not signify consent either. It's just like, you know, so they were all across it, which was really good. Yeah,
I feel like that is huge because I feel like that would be really important to feel like you wouldn't be able to be approached, because the topic of consent is like, you know, something that everyone likes to talk about because it seems to be very hard to get it right. And one thing that I find interesting is that, you know, like even the idea that you would be approached would put people under stress, because I think that there are a lot of people who are used to saying yes or maybe not saying no. when they like don't want to do something. And I think it's interesting that like having that extra level of like, no, please don't even approach me because I don't want to be put in that position where I feel like pressure or like, you know, it's unfortunate, but a lot of people feel like a real sense of fear and maybe even like a fawn response, I think is like common for a lot of people.
Totally.
So it's really cool that they've just totally removed that and gone like, no, we're just going to put something in here. We're going to put like a bit of a framework in here and everyone's just going to be like totally comfortable. Like that's awesome.
I mean, I don't know though, like you would hope, or I would at least assume that like the people going to these parties are like pretty good at communicating needs, boundaries, desires, and not all of them, of course, necessarily, but you know, they would have had more practice than the average person.
Yeah.
And I don't think like if you're prone to fawn responses and like, and you don't want to be fucked by a stranger, you probably like would not go to one of these things without maybe a partner that can look out for your boundaries as well. And I don't know, like, but it's still good to have that in place because then it does take a bit of the guesswork out of it. And
that's what I mean. It's like, I'm not saying everyone there is like terrified of sex, but I'm saying it just takes away like any additional work. Like everyone can just go into that space and know that they're going to be like 100% comfortable. I mean, beyond you're at a sex party and you have to like look around. But I mean, like, I just really like that as a consideration.
Excuse this quick interruption. I'm shamelessly seeking reviews and 5-star ratings for the potty because, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, it's pretty fab. And the more people who get to hear it, the more people I can help with it. Reviews and ratings actually do make a big difference to this little independent podcaster. And it's really easy to just quickly show your support by taking that simple act of either leaving 5 stars for the show on Spotify or even better, writing a written review and leaving 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts. Or if you're a real overachiever, you can do them both. That would be mad. If you're writing a review, though, just be sure to use G-rated words because despite the fact that this is a podcast about sexuality, words like sex can be censored and your review won't make it through the gates. Lame. Anyway, I would personally recommend doing that right now while you remember just to get on top of it and let me know you're with me on this journey. Thanks, gang. Enjoy the rest of the epi.
Who did you see when you were there that you were like, oh, I know you? Because you're saying you bumped into people that you know. Like, who did you know?
How is that a question? Firstly, I'm not going to name them on a podcast.
No, but
secondly, this is an interesting.
It is, dude.
Just like acquaintances that I like don't know super well, but I know like friends of friends and people I've hung out with a little bit at parties and stuff. And it was great because they hadn't been to one before either. So we were like, oh my God, hey, like, how's this for you? Like, what are you observing that's a really interesting experience? Because like we were all just newbies and like, whoa, this is crazy. But you know, all also chillers. And we were just like sitting on a couch, like watching 10 people have really intense sex at one point, and it was sweet. We were just like, wow, look at those guys over there. Oh, that chick just like squirted all over the floor. Like, he started fingering her like 2 seconds ago. Like, holy shit, you know.
Okay, so I want to ask you, what was the most surprising thing you saw? Was there anything you saw that you were like, whoa, what the fuck? Or was there anything that was really funny that happened? Or like, what are some standout kind of things that you were like, didn't expect to see that tonight?
Honestly, nothing. Like,
Really?
I think it would be hard to shock me for starters, but nothing that I can think of. Like, it was pretty standard sex party behavior, exactly as I'd expected, really.
Exactly as you'd expected. That's interesting.
Well, I was sort of thinking there'd be more. I'd see more hardcore stuff, to be honest.
Okay.
At least in the BDSM sort of place. And I mean, I wasn't, I don't know. Maybe I just didn't see everything that happened over the whole night in all the different spaces. But like, it definitely seemed like in the kind of communal sex spaces, because there's like private rooms you can hire out upstairs like for extra, so like I wasn't allowed in those because like people hire them out, so I don't know what kind of was going on in there, but the sex I was seeing was just very like porn sex,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
on that, okay,
Not
so
a lot
on
of
that
like
note,
sensuality.
yeah. Do you think that they could maybe take some tips from you at that sex party on how to do it a bit better, how to do it more in line with the female arousal patterns? What do you think? Like, when you're looking at that, were you like, oh, I wish it wasn't like that?
Yeah, like totally. I was like, fuck that. I would not enjoy that sex. But the thing is, like, they probably
people
really do. Like, they're probably
Yeah.
super visual, visual people with like maybe a strong sexual erotic blueprint. And maybe they've really like have literally like trained their body to enjoy this type of hard and fast pounding friction based sex because they've done a lot of it. They've watched a lot of porn that has that turns them on because it's like visually, sexual and arousing to them. Like, it didn't seem like the women weren't having a great time. And I just don't feel like if you're someone who like doesn't really enjoy sex or penetrative sex with your partner, like that you're going to be going to sex parties to have more of it in front of people, like I think it was, and a lot of, I'm assuming that the people that are having sex in that open space like have a bit of like exhibitionism kink about them, and so they enjoy being watched, and so to make it more watchable and hot in their mind, maybe it is that like hard and fast doggy style, or like really like I don't know, like I guess it's more so like if you were to watch like a really like slow sensual lovemaking session that was like very kind of intimate and vulnerable and connection based and maybe it just wouldn't be as visually arousing or sexy to a lot of people that have like grown up watching porn and finding certain things a turn on. Because like I mean it's not the kind of sex that I like to have, but everyone seems to be enjoying themselves thoroughly, and you're probably so fucking turned on by the fact that you're at a sex party and everyone around you is having sex and people are watching you have sex and it's like all very hot. And so that would be something that would like turn them on so much that then, maybe that kind of hard and fast sex would feel great. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, I think that makes sense because I think that some people do like to do it that way. But yeah,
totally.
I guess I was just wondering if it was still dominated by a little bit of that sort of like heteronormative male-centric sexual model that we're all, and I mean if people have been influenced by the porn that they've been watching and this is the kind of sex they have, maybe it kind of happens in a sneaky way, but I was wondering
100%.
If the patriarchy
totally fuck yeah, it was so heteronormative. It wasn't a very queer space. There was obviously a bit of, but like I barely saw any kind of queer representation. Slightly more in the kink dungeon maybe, but yeah, in the like main sort of areas, it was very heteronormative, very like there was not a lot that I saw, not a lot of cunnilingus, but there was a lot of BJs. There was lots of fucking blowjobs going on, lots of like dudes kind of on top or fucking women from behind. There wasn't heaps of like women on top or like getting like face sitting or getting eaten out, or like it was quite heteronormative. It felt like you're in a porno designed for a man.
This exactly. Okay, now this is what I wanted to get at. This is really interesting. A porno designed for a man. I guess most, like traditional as if it's like some kind of art. Most like traditional porn is designed for men. So I think that that's really easy to kind of like get that mental image. So it did still feel a little bit like that, but it felt also like a very safe and welcoming space.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's
really and
cool.
I didn't get approached or sleazed on by anyone. Like the people that I met were so friendly and so down to like chat. And honestly, I didn't talk to like that many new people. I knew like a handful of people there. My favorite part, I reckon, of the night and my favorite people that I met actually, this is perfect. Shout out. They'll know who they are. I was just about to drop a name, but I was like, hang on. Yeah, there's this like married couple who have kids and have been going to play parties for like nearly 10 years. And the husband came up and was like, hey, like my wife like was too shy to come up, but like she loves you and stuff. And then it turns out I got chatting to both of them, and it turns out that she listens to the podcast and's done my course and stuff. And just, yeah, they were fucking legends. They seemed about my age. And I was just like enamored by I was like, fuck yeah, guys. Like, you've got kids at home, get the babysitter, get yourself down to Melbourne, come to a sex party. Like, and they were total G's, and also really fucking interesting to talk to because they are the veterans that I'm kind of referring to. Like, they'd been to so many sex parties and seen the evolution of the scene in Melbourne. Like, you know, they said way back in the day, you know, you might be at a sex party that's at someone's house while the fucking footy's on the TV and there's a kitty litter and scratching posts like next to the couch where people are fucking, and it's just like very hench, you know? And so they were like, this is a really good quality sex party. And this is also incredibly well held in terms of consent and boundaries compared to a lot of the ones they had been to. And they're like, this party is filling a gap in the market that didn't exist, and we're really fucking stoked because they've been waiting for this kind of event to be available because they've been going to parties for years, and there hasn't really been anything that's like as well curated and held that's like a large one too, you know? Like, I imagine that's exciting because it's like more new people and fucking genitals, you know?
Totally. That's interesting. It sounds like it's definitely like trending in the right direction. Sounds like it was really well done. I am curious to see if this will, I think, follow sort of like the underlying kind of cultural trend around sex, because I feel like, you know, it was a while ago now that we had this whole like Me Too movement, and we were like, maybe we should actually start treating like rape as like a real problem that we're going to pay attention to, and like consent became a thing, and now we're thinking about that. And only now, after that foundation's been established, now we're finally like, you know, female empowerment, female pleasure. Like, there are now a lot of people like you who are designing, you know, like spaces and sex toys and services and everything to kind of empower women because they haven't been empowered. And I'm wondering, I hope, wouldn't you love to see at one of these sex parties some more of the like female-centric kind of like sexual modes and like things like that? Wouldn't you love to
like
see
just
that?
Pussy worship for like an hour. Yeah, well, of
Like,
course I would. And, you know, like, maybe there was and I just didn't see it, or maybe it was like in one of the spaces that there wasn't like a convenient spot for me to lurk and watch, and it would have been too obvious that I was just standing there staring. So I just didn't, you know, like the spaces that I got to like really sit and observe for like a proper period of time while people were having sex, like they had couches nearby that I could sort of sit and discreetly like hang out with my friends and also like chat with them while watching people have sex. Whereas like one of the other spaces was like there wasn't anywhere to sit and just be a voyeur. So fuck knows, maybe that was the more central place. I don't know, but definitely would love to see more lovemaking, more like, not that like fucking can't be absolutely super loving and also super pleasurable, but like I would have liked to have seen like a broader array of like sexual expression, because basically everyone seemed to be going at the same pace, like douche, like, and it all seemed to be like the women getting fucked. Like the women were getting fucked by men. What I would have loved to have seen is like more 69s, more like guys going down on a chick, while like another one's like kissing her, like sucking her nipples or something. Like more like slow sensual sex at a different pace and with like lots of like really loving eye contact and like, I don't know, like, you know, yeah, it was just very like impact based and visually intense and horny.
Totally.
Yeah. One person that I've been chatting to about it, who's had a bit of experience in that world, like when I sort of said, oh, you know, like something I noticed was the sex was like quite heteronormative and porny, and like I think I described it as like basic, a bit basic, bit like just, you know, straight up fucking. And he like really laughed at that and was like, I totally know what you mean. Like I completely I know that vibe. I completely agree. Like, he's like, it's less like that in the more queer spaces. But he told me a story about how his first sex party that he went to, I think, where he had nothing to wear. He had to like go, like, he fashioned a costume out of like a leather belt and like went and bought some chains from Bunnings. He said
Sounds amazing.
yeah, I was like, go you, that's commitment. And I don't know, I can't remember, maybe I can't remember if it was his first party or just a party in the early days, but he went to this party and the first thing he saw when he walked in was like a really like bearish guy fucking someone in the ass and then like high-fiving another guy as he walked past, and it was all very like bro-y and like, I don't know, like just porny and stuff. And he like, I can't remember exactly how he described it. It was way better than that, but he really set the scene, and I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. Like, he said it really put him off for like a solid year because like the vibe in there was like really gross, and very much lacking like sensuality and I guess a bit more of a feminist approach to sexuality. So yeah, he said that that's definitely a thing, and so yeah,
Cool.
I don't know. It's just been interesting to hear people's different experiences.
Okay, so here's a question for you. What kinds of sex were people having? So you said, okay, lots of jackhammer boning, lots of blowjobs, whatever. But what else? Like, what did you see? Did you see whipping? Did you see, like, what did you see? Did you see, like, gimp masks? Did you see, like, head-to-toe leather? Like, what did you see?
No, so I guess because the play party was large and there was only one small room that was for the BDSM stuff, it wasn't a fully kink focused party. So outside of the dungeon, it was regular, not so kinky stuff. But yeah, in the dungeon, there was definitely like lots of spanking. Like the main thing was spanking and like flagellation. So like impact play, like lining, there was like a dance floor and a stage and a couple of little like performances and stuff. And then lining the walls were different stations with like, I guess, you know, a cross to be chained up to and different shackles or different like bits of furniture that you could be bent over or chained to, or I don't know, I didn't really pay heaps of attention, but just classic like, you know, BDSM dungeon vibes like you'd expect. And, you know, one of the tables had like the electric kind of shock tool that like gives you little like electrical stimulation and stuff. And then I guess, I don't know if people, I'm assuming people brought their own like whips and crops and whatever. I'm assuming, and like strap-ons and things like that. Then there was like little booths that were kind of, all of the spaces were like semi-partitioned off, but with like see-through walls or like, you know, lattice so that you could still see in, or just like sort of thin bits of fabric here and there. So it was like like you were kind of in a booth, but you were kind of like still visible to the rest of the party. So it was like semi-private. So I think they did a nice job of like creating spaces within spaces that gave you a sense, like somewhere to tuck yourself away, but then also you still got to fuck in public, basically. And probably my favorite, most impressive thing that I saw was like there was shibari going on at a couple of little places. And so it's difficult to describe, but like the position that this woman was tied up in had her in like a really extreme kind of back bend with her legs tucked up behind her and then her arms kind of tucked up in this way, and she was upside down, and just like the guy who tied her up was standing and she was hanging, like swinging, all tied up, upside down, giving a blowjob. And he was just, so her mouth was around his cock and he was just gently swinging her on the rope because she's suspended, and like swinging her like on and off his dick. It's really hard to describe. I mean, it looked like visually, it looked like so cool. It was phenomenal. I was like, oh my fucking God. Like, it's just, she's at the perfect height. He's just kind of rocking her and she's swinging back and forth on and off his dick. And she's like tied up in this way that her body is like splayed out in this crazy way. And anyway, it was like, whoa, Okay. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is quite cool
But-
to see because, like, even like shibari, when it's not people having sex, it looks cool to see
It's
people tied up
cool.
in weird shapes. It looks awesome.
Exactly. Totally.
That's
and like
crazy
you would
that you
be,
saw that. That
you know,
sounds
she
very
was
elaborate.
well, and I guess like the vicarious experience like that I was kind of feeling was like, whoa, like she is completely bound and her arms and legs are completely incapacitated. She's upside down. She's like bent in this way. She literally like has to just let her weight hang and has no control whatsoever. He's even moving her back and forth so that she can fillet him. And so like the level of like total surrender
Yeah.
and then having like someone like kind of deep throating your throat, like it must have been like, because I'm assuming she's really into the feeling of total surrender and
Yeah.
just it would be like ecstatic bliss of like letting yourself just be completely, I guess, moved like a puppet, but an
Yeah.
erotic one. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
like, whoa, okay, fuck. Like, because if there's anything kinky that I would probably get into that I wouldn't mind trying, it's just like the shibari stuff because I love just like I don't like being. I'm not a sub. I wouldn't like say that I like being in a submissive role, but I do like being totally surrendered and feeling like absolute like trust and as though someone's completely got my weight and they're just completely moving my body and my limbs and I get to be a floppy rag doll and like I love that. Like the Pillow Princess vibes. So shibari kind of appeals because I don't have to do anything. I literally just get to like be and someone else takes responsibility for all my limbs and my body weight and I just get to hang. So that sounds cool. I don't know if I would want to be deep throating someone.
That's
while
what I was
doing
gonna
that,
say.
but-
I mean, you get to hang, but yeah, I think you and your tiny mouth, that'd be a pretty big achievement if you achieved that.
Hey, I can give blowjobs. It's just, yeah. I mean, it definitely looked. It didn't look like something
Intense. Sounds intense.
I'd be stoked. Yeah.
Sounds like you'd have to train for
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. She had zero gag reflex. It was just
Amazing.
Yeah. So I don't know, like it wasn't super. The kink stuff was really tame. Like there wasn't anything super extreme or out of the ordinary that I haven't seen a lot before. So yeah, nothing too much to report. It was just interesting, like being around people having sex, and then they would like look up at you while you're watching them, and then
Did you have what were those moments like? Were they intense? Was there any intensity in watching people, or was it just sort of like, what you looking at?
It was so normal. I mean, like most people were pretty engaged in what they were doing, and they might glance up and notice you watching, and you'd kind of smile at them. Like, I don't know,
You kind of smile at them, what, like when you're grocery shopping and you accidentally like bump heads with someone reaching for a cucumber, and you're kind of like, oh,
Totally. Like I was like struggling not to give people like a cheeky thumbs up or a wink or something. But, I don't know what the etiquette is. I was like, I don't want to fucking freak anyone out. And like, yeah, luckily I was like with friends for a lot of it. So I would be sitting with them and it wasn't like I was just sitting on my own staring at people having sex, like we were kind of chatting, but while we were chatting, our eyes were just roving over the mass of like naked bodies in front of us, in all different configurations. But yeah.
It feels like a very stimulating environment.
Oh, fuck yeah, dude. 100%.
So another question for you. You know how people kind of get hooked on porn because it's like, it's hyper visually stimulating, very intense sex a lot of the time. Do you feel like there's a similar vibe that could happen here of like once you have sex like this, like did you get the feeling that there are people that can like get too deep into this scene? Or do you feel like it was just like fun and friendly vibes?
Well, I think that like that's super interesting because for me, it not being my thing and not really being, not being a porn watcher or someone that has done any of this, and also, I guess, knowing what I know, like as a sex educator about what porn does to the brain and, you know, like how you can actually very much kind of desensitize yourself to the point where you need more and more intense stimuli to get that same level of arousal and da-da-da. Yeah, I was fully thinking like, oh, shit, like I wonder if like you got into this, whether you would ever be able to go back to regular sex again and whether your sex life in the meantime was just kind of a bit grey and mundane and you were just hanging out for these parties. Like I'm assuming for the most part people obviously still enjoy sex anyway, and then these are like fun, exciting, sometimes food kind of events that just add a little cherry on top. But then I definitely feel as though, you know, it is basically doing, even just to sit there and watch that, it is doing what porn's doing to your brain. And like a friend that I was with who's a male, he was saying like, wow, this is like in one sense kind of triggering and in one sense maybe healing in a strange way, but like I've got a really, really big wound around porn, and this wound from watching so much porn from a young age really, really like impacted and tainted and stunted my sexuality in a way that I've been trying to heal for years and like undo the damage of watching so much porn and the kind of porn. And so he was like, yeah, being here, it's literally like being in a, like watching a live porno. And that kind of got me thinking like, yeah, 100% if you were doing this regularly, then, but it's like, I think porn becomes such a problem because people are doing it habitually, like every single day or regularly, and they're masturbating to it. And then that's forming the link, you know, that association. And so, I don't know, like it definitely wouldn't surprise me if some people who frequented these places couldn't live without it and couldn't get as turned on without it. I mean, I've had a friend who has had a cuckolding fantasy and it was just ruining like multiple relationships over the years because he couldn't get hard unless he was like somehow either thinking, like fantasizing, or it got to a point where he had to be actually like living out a cuckolding fantasy. And obviously a lot of, you know, women aren't into that and didn't want to be fucked by somebody else in front of their boyfriend. So like he had some really real issues like with his relationships because he was like, fuck, like I've kind of broken my brain and my dick, and now my dick only responds to this very specific, very rare and intense situation of like somebody else fucking my girlfriend.
Intensity of it, because like, you know, if you have kinks for, let's say, like leather, and you only like to do it with your wife when she's wearing leather, that doesn't seem like that's going to necessarily destroy your life. But if you can only have sex in one really intense, extreme way, or one way that you can't really get a lot of, or you can't get reliably, that sounds like that's when it starts to become a problem. And I guess that's what the problem with porn is like it's innately disruptive to having like a sexual experience where you're able to connect with your partner in sort of like a neutral setting, you know?
Yeah, and I mean connect, that's like the key word, hey? Like it's so like if you have gotten to a point where you can't feel aroused and you can't come unless it's, you know, with the aid of a really intense scenario or fantasy or fetish or kink, then it is no longer about connection with your partner, is it? Like it's absolutely like it's got nothing to do with connection anymore. So like I think like the inability to like get off on connection and intimacy with your partner without, you know, it being in front of other people or there being some other really intense element involved, then that doesn't feel supernatural or helpful to me. So I don't know, like, yeah, who knows? Like I guess if I set up the Labia Lounge and I found someone who was willing to talk about it, like if I set it up there, I could start asking people like, but the thing is like, I'd be so hesitant to ask something that might feel as though I'm yucking their yum. I mean, I know a lot of people.
Like, how has attending events like this changed your sex life? You could just ask something like that's pretty neutral.
Yeah, and I probably could just be like, because for most of them, I'd say they would 100% say it's really enhanced our sex life and it's really enhanced our relationship. Yeah. But then I could probably ask like, so are you still able to get turned on and enjoy sex without this?
Yeah.
I could probably just ask that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, next one,
Yeah.
Labia Lounge. I will be so
Totally.
keen to see that set up. That would be so fun.
Totally. Hey, me again. If you'd like to support the potty and you've already given it 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on, I want to mention that you can buy some really dope merch from the website and get yourself a Labia Lounge tote, tee, togs. Yep, you heard that right. I even have Labia Lounge bathers. Or a cute fanny pack if that'd blow your hair back. So if fashion isn't your passion, though, you can donate to my Buy Me a Coffee donation page, which is actually called Buy Me a Soy Chai Latte, because I'll be the first to admit I'm a bit of a Melbourne cafe tosser like that. And yes, that is my coffee order. You can do a once-off donation or an ongoing membership and sponsor me for as little as 3 fat ones a month. And I also offer one-on-one coaching and online courses that'll help you level up your sex life and relationship with yourself and others in a really big way. So every bit helps because it ain't cheap to put out a sweet podcast into the world every week out of my own pocket. So I will be undyingly grateful if you support me and my biz financially in any of these ways. And if you like, I'll even give you a mental BJ with my mind from the lounge itself. Saucy. I'll pop the links in the show notes. Thank you. Later.
What is your main takeaway from this? What do you feel like has changed, or what information have you gathered that was kind of your main takeaway, your main standout?
I don't know. I think just that it was really refreshing to be in a space like that. So my main takeaway is I'm proud of myself for going, and I also am quite surprised because I would actually go again. I would totally go. Not that I engaged with anyone or felt oh my God, I'm so turned on, I wish I was having sex with someone here. I don't think I would go for those. And maybe, I'm not a true sex party goer and I'm just a voyeur or whatever. But I would go not to actually play with anyone necessarily, although I'm open to being open to that. But to just be in a social setting where you can just fucking be yourself and do whatever you want and not wear clothes and just be very hard on the PDA and I guess where there's this unspoken camaraderie and shared experience and bonding kind of factor that you wouldn't get somewhere else. Because when I would bump into people, a part of me was oh my God, someone I know, shit, they're going to think I'm into this. And then I was wait, well, they're here too. And also who cares if they think I'm do you know what I mean? So it was interesting because it challenged a few little bits of residual conditioning or I guess blockages that I didn't even know were there because I hadn't put them to the test or been in this environment. And I felt really excited to discover that even though I'd been really disinterested in exploring that side of things, for years now, I've just been meh, what, that doesn't appeal to me. I'm very vanilla. It doesn't really get me going. It doesn't mean I can't enjoy being in the space where it's going on and relishing in the liberation of that and other people's enjoyment of that and being this is fucking such a sweet place to hang out with your mates. And have this kind of secret shared experience that not many people get. I liked that, it's a secret society, and if you know, and if you've been to one, then the other people that are also there are now we can feel safe with you knowing this secret part of our lives in our relationship, So that was kind of cool and it was refreshing. And I was man, if they could just get a better sound system and really curate a good lineup, if there was a proper pumping dance floor, that was the thing that was missing for me. I didn't really get a proper dance. And honestly, if I wasn't chatting with someone or dancing, I was what do I fucking do with myself? Because I wasn't there to have sex and do stuff. So I was oh, I actually do need the music to kind of give me energy and keep me going and give me something to do with myself when I'm not engaging with people, because I don't have the social juice to talk to everyone, people all night. I need little breaks where I can just go and dance and be in my body. Yeah. So, yeah.
Sounds super interesting. Sounds
Yeah.
interesting.
Totally. I would recommend everyone get themselves along to a sex party because honestly, it's very like, even if you don't engage in any other way other than like kind of observing discreetly and like maybe having a few nice conversations with people, it's really fucking cool as an environment to meet new people in, and also a way of like releasing layers of shame around sex, around body image, you know, like there really is an insight. There's no shame and there's no judgment. People are comfortable in their bodies. They're comfortable with sex. It's literally the most sex positive environment you can think of. So that in itself, like just being in that environment, you'll get this transmission of like, you know, that will be quite healing, I think, if you do harbor any shame around like, you know, from the stigma and the taboo that sex kind of holds in our society. But yeah, I mean, it's not for everyone, but seriously, if you've got a friend to go with you and it's not too terrifying, I would give it a go, at least a big one like this, because then there's so much anonymity and like there's so many people you can just get lost in there and not be too worried about anything, like anyone trying to rope you into their threesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Do it.
Oh yeah. Well, there you go. An hour-long advertisement for this sex dungeon.
For Virtue Advice. See if I'll get them to sponsor me. Fuck yeah.
Honestly.
And that's it, darling hearts. Thanks for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. If you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch, because that's a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism, and you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify, and destigmatize with this here podcast. I'm also always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, questions or guest suggestions, so feel free to get in touch via my website or over on Insta. You can also send me in TMI stories to be shared anonymously on the pod. My handle is FreyaGraf_the Labia Lounge, if my account hasn't been deleted for being too sex positive, which, you know, is always a possibility with censorship. But just in case the chronic censorship finally does obliterate my social channels, I'd highly recommend going and joining my mailing list and snagging yourself some fun freebies for the trouble at www.freyagraf.com/freebies. Anyway, later, labial legends. See you next time.